Some submitters sought more permissive approach for activities on Māori land and treaty settlement land within an outstanding natural landscape. And then we have the submissions on the mapping, that's the last point, and the schedule or the list of outstanding natural landscapes. Council's position at the hearing. So the key changes here, amendments proposed to allow for additions to existing buildings that existed at the time the plan was notified. So for people who have an existing dwelling or building within an outstanding natural landscape, there was an allowance for that building to increase in its footprint by up to 50 square metres. So that wasn't in the notified plan, so just providing a bit more flexibility for buildings that are already there. But that's the first point. The second point is actually a tightening up. So as I mentioned before, up to 50 square metres was permitted for a new building within a outstanding natural landscape. That second bullet point is restricting that to buildings that are ancillary to pastoral farming, cropping, other non-intensive forms of rural production. So it's, we sort of tightened up the rules. If you want to put a new dwelling within an outstanding natural landscape, that became a restricted discretionary activity. So previously you could have a 50 square metre dwelling, which you don't get too many dwellings that small, but you could have had one. That's now a restricted discretionary activity where there's no other location for that dwelling or building to take place or be established. Amendments proposed to exempt some forms of infrastructure, for example, traffic and directional signage was caught by height controls and controls on the finish, exterior finish controls in these landscapes. So there were some exemptions for infrastructure. New assessment criteria to recognise mana whenua values associated with these landscapes, and amendments to the mapped extent of a number of ONLs, which, like these significant ecological areas, did result in some of the submitters being happy with the council's approach. Unfortunately, we don't have the statistics, the numbers on that, but there were some amendments made to the mapping of the outstanding natural landscapes. Sorry, that's the presentation, Madam Chair.
Councillor Webster. I didn't even have to look. I thought I know Councillor Webster.
Well, so we can actually, because we've probably got a bit of time, we can actually bring up the unitary plan viewer and we can look at parts of Auckland to see how extensive or not these landscapes actually are.
Well, as you well know, John, I am right in the middle of this, and thank goodness that Penny Pirrett used a bit of common sense. The Te Pora Peninsula, okay, ONL, some wonderful person from here actually wrote a submission suggesting that the Te Pora Peninsula was an ONL from Burma Road all along the flats, and that maybe it could have goats and sheep, but certainly not larger footed animals. That place has been for many, many, many decades dairy farming. So, you know, it's sort of, I've always been very sarcastic about SNAs and ONLs for the reasons that it defies logic that a farmer would then have to go, if he was cropping, I mean, what we do on dairy farms is actually we reseed, we plough, we plant, and actually that disturbs the soil, so presumably for 50 square metre is a permitted activity, so anything over that should need a resource consent.
Yeah.
So it's sort of that area.
If we can zoom out just a little bit, I think you'll see more of the, so this is the Te Pora Peninsula.
Yeah, no, at the end.
Yeah. So the hatched areas are the
hatched areas, absolutely agree with.
Just hang on, Councillor Webster, just while we pull this up, remember just the discussion that we had with Councillor Casey. We're just finding out the information, so we just need to be very careful about going this okay, that not okay.
I understand.
Your views,
I understand
your passion.
Well, maybe when this comes up I won't be here to vote, but...
Oh, come on, what kind of attitude
was
that? Months away. You'll wait for a lot of votes.
I will just clarify.
No, just this
in
bit.
general terms.
In general terms. So, I'm trying to do something generally. I mean, if this sort of thing isn't fixed, probably going back to Councillor Casey's issue, how can we fix something? And it's sort of,
Same answer.
Same answer, yeah.
it does sort of undermine though, and I know we can't say too much, but the very fact that that area was nominated an ONL and talks about sheep and goats when actually it's a dairy farming area.
So I think this is a really good example of one thing done, we modified our position, submitters, I think, and knowing some of them would have made that position
Well, they didn't because they
forcefully,
didn't know.
but I think then when this comes back to us, that's then our debate. Penny?
Perhaps if I could just clarify, the Tapora issue was actually around an outstanding natural feature rather than an outstanding natural landscape. So the outstanding natural feature is now shown on Tapora, which shows that it was a fairly extensive issue. Outstanding natural features are more about the geology that sits underneath the surface, as opposed to outstanding natural landscapes, which are more about the visual amenity aspect and that type of landscape importance. So I think what we just need to know is, when we look at it, it's both outstanding natural landscapes and outstanding natural features, John, rather than just focusing on O and Ls. It's O and Fs that was, so what you see up there now, Councillor Webster, is the O and F, which covers a far more significant part of Tapora. If you just take that off and put back the outstanding natural landscape,
It's less of an impact.
it's a much lesser area.
That's fine.
Yep.
Not quite as much of an OMG.
That is, but unfortunately, people who are currently trying to get resource consents are being,
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing you say is, just like Councillor Casey has indicated a strong interest in volcanic view shafts, that we need to look at both outstanding natural landscapes and outstanding natural features when we bring back the report to you in August, so you're very clear on what the recommendations of the panel are for both of those issues.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Webster. Member Yamane.
I think this is a process issue just highlighted by Jackie Hill. What's the Māori name for Jackie Hill?
I don't know.
I did a quick
Jackie Hill,
Google. It looks like Te Kā Maki.
Right.
So, I mean, all that's highlighting to me is certainly not now, but it's a question when we get to the decision making. Those kind of things and kind of making the names more meaningful and giving cognizance to the Māori names in the unitary plan. Is that an exercise that can be done, or does that kind of overhaul, can't do it because of the statutory process?
So, I mean, there is some of that in the unitary plan already, in some of the naming, but it's not extensive. I guess the challenge would be doing that in the time frame, but those sorts of changes can be done without the need for a plan change and submissions and so on. They are essentially could fall under a clause 16 of the RMA minor amendment as a future piece of work. So it's certainly an important piece of work, but
It was just something that highlighted by that
Yep.
name.
Te Kaura Amaki would certainly have something to say on that, yeah. If they haven't already said it 800 years ago. No, Webster and Yamane, no one else on that one? Councillor Darby.
Just want to get a sense, so this all links back to section 6. What year did section 6 come in of the RMA?
Those provisions have been in the RMA from day one, 1999, section 6. Yeah.
So ONLs and ONFs have been required since then?
I'd have to double check, but I think they've been in section 6 since the beginning. Yeah.
And so just in terms of, in the plan, I'm just trying to get a sense of what we'll be looking at. The ONLs and ONFs, they have their own unique objectives and policies and
Rules.
activity status. Everything just flows out as per normal.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So,
If I can just add to that, I guess one of the issues with outstanding natural landscapes is that we've relied on a lot of work from the regional council in the RPS, Plan Change 8 to the RPS, which had appeals and came through this council as well to resolve some of those. Though, as you know, the RPS from the regional council didn't have the rules in place, and the thing with the unitary plan is we've used a lot of that mapping, but we've now got the rules in place in terms of consent requirements, activity status and so on, so that's the new part for a number of the landscapes. But they had the policy backing in the regional policy statement from the ARC, but they never had the teeth in the district plans.
Yeah.
In some cases they did, so we've now got a more sort of consistent region-wide approach, and we've got the rules in the unitary plan, and I guess that's what's generated some of the submissions and concerns, because it's the first time they've had rules in some of these locations to give the overlay some teeth.
Okay, and sorry, just last one. The Maunga, are they identified as ONFs?
Yes, but not ONLs.
Yeah.
So the natural features, the geological sites. So the ONFs, which isn't really part of this presentation, but it's come up because they often overlap. So things like Lion Rock at Piha is within an outstanding natural landscape, as you'd imagine. It's a stunning landscape. But the rock itself is a natural feature. It's a good example of that. So the natural features are the volcanic cones, lava caves, waterfalls, things like Lion Rock. Whereas the landscapes are more extensive, generally more extensive areas. But Tapora is interesting because it's a very extensive natural feature, geological area. And obviously some concerns from submitters around that raised at the hearings.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Darby. I think that some of this is, again, that kind of bringing together the discussion across the whole region. I just checked with Penny, and for Ross and Linda and I, we dealt a lot with our ridgelines, sensitive ridgelines, protected ridgelines and all that sort of thing, but I don't think that was universally understood around the region. So for some people this is something entirely new, and for some areas sort of seen as a bit of a retrograde step and everything in between. So, okay. Any other questions on that? Nope. Right, mana whenua.
Fantastic. All right, so I'll just ask Jim Clark to join me. Jim was our lead planner on the Māori land topic. Which one are we doing first? Oh, okay. Come and join us, but we're doing mana whenua sites. So Chloe Trinath, who was at the last presentation, she was our lead on the mana whenua sites. She's unavailable, but that's all right. We will carry on. So, again, just starting with the statutory context in the RMA, and to stress that the topic of mana whenua sites and Māori cultural heritage features pretty extensively in Part 2 of the RMA, twice as a matter of national importance, in Section 6E and Section 6F. Also in Section 7A, reference to councils having particular regard to kaitiakitanga, stewardship by mana whenua. So, and then Section 8, the reference to the principles of the Treaty Waitangi. So there's pretty strong RMA context for these parts of the unitary plan. So starting with the sites and places of significance. So there are two main categories of sites in the plan. There are sites of significance to mana whenua, and there are sites of value to mana whenua. And they have quite a different approach. So the sites of significance, 61 sites, 46 rolled over from the operative district plans, and 15 additional sites were added. The key things that require a consent in the vicinity or on the sites of significance are earthworks, provision of infrastructure, new buildings and subdivision. That was in the notified plan. No, I'm just looking at this and we've got the wrong image. Apologies for that. Skip forward to this image here is of a site of significance. So the slides just got slightly out of order here. So this, unfortunately, we do have the Māori name. Te Tokeroa Headland or Coil Park in Point Chev actually has two sites. So the one that we're showing in the image is the one in the park at the end there, but there is another site. I unfortunately don't have the reference for it, but it straddles public and private land. You see them mapped with shapes that have more of a link to the the exact nature of the place than the sites of value which use circles, but we'll get to them in a second. So that's an example of a site of significance